is the Banner Baseball Show. Paul Mancano and a very sleepy John Meoli here on a Friday in February. We are here on the first day of Orioles real baseball. Well, sort of real. An exhibition game being played down in Sarasota, Florida between the Orioles and the Yankees.
Not even a little real.
Not even a little bit.
Not even a little real.
A little bit. I mean, maybe a little bit more real than just live batting practice on the backfields. This was played at Ed Smith Stadium between the Orioles and the Yankees, and the Orioles came away with a 2-0 win. But we're not going to spend too much time breaking down that game. We're going to spend a lot of our time talking about the news that came from Mike Elias this morning, which is Jordan Westburg has a partially torn UCL in his right elbow. We're going to talk about what his recovery could look like, what it means for the Orioles, and where they go from here. But John, first and foremost, I thought about this morning. I woke up and I said, maybe I try to sneak in Fast and Furious 1, The Fast and the Furious, before the first ever exhibition game, which would mean that I would technically have started this long slog that I've promised, which is watching all the Fast and Furious movies at some point during the offseason. Offseason to me doesn't end until the first pitch is thrown in the first spring training game. I got up this morning. I said, I can sneak it in. It's an hour and 46 minutes. It's $4 on Amazon. I don't know if I'm shelling out the cash to watch a movie that came out in 2001.
Yeah, I mean, you could. So what I have is that I have them basically all recorded like off cable. So whatever your I don't know if you're a cord cutter or not. I know you
I am
used
a
to work
YouTube
for
TV.
Yeah, so just search for Fast, and everything that looks like a Fast and the Furious movie based off that, you just record it, and that's the move. I didn't know, given your given you used to work for a cable company, whether it was like a spite divorce from terrestrial communications or how that worked. But I'm glad to know you're in the YouTube TV category. I was just talking to somebody about that today, about how we're basically the frogs in the pot, like just prices get raised, and YouTube TV I think costs like over twice what I started paying for it, and
yeah,
I'm already done it. I'm not going to go back to Comcast. Sorry, Comcast.
Essentially, though, all of these bundles that they're creating are just setting up new cable. It's just being presented in a different way. But basically, we're all going to have to get new cable with like different add-ons and everything. It's all a circle. Whatever. I didn't end up purchasing it, but maybe if it comes available for free on one of the other million platforms that I have a login for, I will watch it. But we'll see.
It is on. It is on a lot. All of them are.
I would watch it on cable. There aren't like many curse words that they have to bleep out, because sometimes like you watch The Departed on cable and it's like it's a different movie.
Yeah, it's not a family film, but it's a film about family. So I think they just have some salty language, but not as much as you would think.
That's true. You have said that before. All right, let's talk about the injury to Jordan Westburg, because this is a major blow at the start of camp. We got through the first week of spring training and thought, all right, biggest news so far is that Jackson Holliday had surgery to remove the hamate bone in his hand. He's going to miss the first couple weeks of the regular season. That's not the end of the world. No major injuries other than that. Jordan Westburg had an oblique strain several weeks ago, but that was only supposed to keep him out for the first week or so of Grapefruit League action. Looked like the Orioles dodged the injury bullet. Looked like you're off to a great start in 2026. No major injuries. And then Jordan Westburg sort of falls off the map a little bit, disappears from camp. There's some rumors that start flying around. Yesterday, Craig Albanez was kind of murky about his status and what was plaguing him. And then we find out this morning that Jordan Westburg had reported to the training staff a few days ago that he was getting some soreness in his right elbow, something that he had in the past, but never this consistent. He had imaging done, and it appears he has a partially torn UCL, which is the ulnar collateral ligament. Of course, usually leads to Tommy John in pitchers. It appears to be chronic, so it's something that he's had for a while, but never to this extent, and has never resorted in imaging in the past. The Orioles are not going to give Jordan Westburg, and he is not electing to have Tommy John surgery. He's going to have a platelet-rich plasma injection, and if that sounds familiar, it is the PRP injection that Kyle Bradish had 2 years ago at the start of spring training. Essentially, they're injecting blood that has a lot of plasma in it into the elbow and hoping that the injury heals on its own. The recovery timetable for Jordan Westburg is he is out until the end of April at the very earliest. So we're looking at a May return for Jordan Westburg. And John, first and foremost, you have to think of the player himself. This is a massive blow to a guy that has had very poor luck on the injury front, going back to his broken hand in 2024, missed a lot of time in 2025 with hamstring and ankle injuries. And now he is out for the first month plus of the regular season.
Yeah, and this is the part where you kind of speak in platitudes. Like, they all want to be out there and they all want the Orioles to win, but I feel like Jordan Westburg kind of not exemplifies that, but he is an extreme example of that. You could tell just based on how he was speaking, even as somebody who had an oblique issue and wasn't really a regular citizen, as Mike Elias would call it, of spring training. Like, even as somebody who knew that the return was close and that this year was potentially going to be different for him, you could tell the change in his energy and how he was kind of going about things down in Sarasota. And this is unfortunate. When you mentioned Kyle Bradish a couple years ago, I have a very low level of belief, confidence, conviction in any injury to an elbow to a UCL not ending in Tommy John surgery. I think it's a little different for position players, and I think that, when we hear from Jordan Westburg, we'll probably hear something like, if this gives him a chance to stay on the field this year and to help this team in any way, shape, or form, he's going to exhaust all the options to make that happen before something that would take that off the table. I just think that, for a team that, for a player, I guess, that has a lot kind of riding on this season, given how the last couple have gone, and he said it himself that when he played last year, he played pretty well. Between his injuries, he had like an 880 OPS. That was a real, I don't think there's a lot of other people on the Orioles that had an 880 OPS for a long stretch of last season. I would venture to say there weren't any. So for them not to have that and for him not to be able to build on that is a blow.
Yeah, and you mentioned a lot riding on the season for him. Given the amount of time that he has missed, I mean, Jordan Westburg needs, unfortunately, a lot of this stuff is out of his control, as are a lot of injuries, but he does need to kind of show that he can stay healthy. And he is supposed to be entering arbitration eligibility after this season. So, his pay is going to be determined by how much and how well he plays. It's just a brutal thing for somebody who has been the heartbeat of the lineup, who has been the glue, as Tony Mansolino called him. You wrote on the banter.com, where people can subscribe $1 for 6 months, about Jordan Westburg being in that lineup was so important for them in 2023, so important for them in 2024. It's not really a coincidence that 2024, the Orioles get off to such a hot start and then falter in the final couple of months of the season. It coincides with when Jordan Westburg breaks his hand and misses as much time as he does. He is a steady hitter. He's an all-star infielder. And especially with Jackson Holliday's injury, which is supposed to take him out for the first couple weeks of the regular season, Westburg can play third. He can play second. He can play short in a pinch. He's a good fielder. He's just an all-around good baseball player, and he does so much for this Orioles team.
Yeah, and it's been interesting kind of, breaking that down, and to say that he is like as consistent and reliable and steady and kind of, I don't want to say old school, I don't want to say gritty to say, but like say all those things implies that his teammates and his peers who are, these products of the Orioles rebuild, this homegrown core, it implies that they're not, and that is not true. But he just carries himself differently. He feels like he is the kind of player that you win with. You win with great players. You win with Adley Rutschman's being Adley Rutschman's and Gunnar Henderson's being Gunnar Henderson's, and you win with a real high quality starting rotation, and you win with a lockdown bullpen. But players like Jordan Westburg make you a lot better because that's just one more really good player. And I think subtracting the one really good player that he represented over the last couple of years has been really impactful on this team. And I think, too, to the Orioles' credit, I guess they have done a lot since the last season ended to make it so that they are not a Jordan Westburg injury away from falling apart. Whether that works out, whether that plays out the way that you want it to, we are about to find out. But it would be a lot different proposition if they did not have those steady core type players, those lineup extenders, and this happened. It would be a lot different conversation.
John, is that a cat in the background, or is that one of your
That is
children?
a cat in my background. Yeah, it's my sweet boy Tom. I don't know what he's doing, but I'm pretty upset with him right now.
He wants to join the podcast. He's got some thoughts about Jordan Westburg.
He's got a lot to say.
I think fans obviously would be understandable if they got some deja vu to 2 years ago with Kyle Bradish, because Kyle Bradish has the partially torn UCL. He does not want to get Tommy John surgery. The Orioles say, we're going to treat this with a PRP injection, hope that this injury heals on its own. Kyle Bradish came back from that PRP injection and started the season like any other starting pitcher. He's pitching at the beginning of April. He makes 8 starts, comes out of a start in June, and ends up having to get Tommy John surgery. And that starts the timeline all over again, where he's out 12 plus months. He finally makes his return to the mound this past year with just about a month and a half remaining. It's different for position players. Bryce Harper is the prime example. He broke the record, I think, for fastest return from Tommy John surgery. He had Tommy John surgery in November of 2022, eventually came back and was playing on the field as a first baseman in the majors in May 2023. So that's a very quick turnaround, 6-month turnaround. But when you're doing a PRP injection, I think fans' first reaction is this going to work? Is this going to be something that he can battle through and is going to heal on its own and he's going to get through the rest of the regular season for? Or is this just kicking the can down the road? Are we going to get to the point in May or June or July where Jordan Westburg says, you know what? I thought it was working. This is something I wanted to do, but I'm going to have to shut it down again and get Tommy John surgery. Now, it's not as drastic because he is a position player. So if he does end up getting that Tommy John surgery, maybe he's able to come back at the start of spring training for 2027. But still, you worry a little bit that Jordan Westburg, one, may not be himself while dealing with that partially torn UCL and he comes back. And two, this may just be a waste of time, that the Orioles may have been better off just ripping the Band-Aid off and getting Tommy John right off the bat for Jordan Westburg.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of thoughts that I kind of have around this subject at large. The first is that this is a really painful surgery and a really miserable rehab that extends months and months and months. And if you play baseball, if you've been around baseball, you have been around people who are dealing with it. And to sign up for it when there's literally any other option is a harder thing to do as the person who's doing it than the person who is speculating it as an option. I think the Bryce Harper return was kind of an outlier. Ironically, the Orioles kind of, if there's a world where Jordan Westburg could just hit and not throw and be the fourth right-handed hitting DH type on this roster, and I'm not sure that's a total. I'm not sure that could work out as well as they would want it to. So they're kind of boxed into two outcomes. This works, and he's able to play some this season, maybe play all the season, or it doesn't, and you're ending up with the outcomes, being traditionally what it was. Where I think it would be a little tricky is if we get into like the end of the season and the PRP has run its course and stops working and surgery is required, and then you're talking about a delayed impact of 2027. But I was thinking more about this along the lines of Felix Bautista, who had his elbow issue in like late August 2024, and because it's his right, it's the Orioles' right. Like, if there's any chance that he can pitch in the playoffs, let's see if it can happen. And you're talking about an outlier outcome when he would be back to pitch down the stretch in 2020. Sorry, this is 2023. So outlier outcome that he'd be back to pitch down the stretch of 2024. And is that possible? Is that probable? not if you wait until October for the surgery, but if you have it in mid-August, it's inside the realm of possibility at least. So I thought more about that in terms of deciding, not deciding, but if there was something that was going to materially impact when, if surgery happens, Jordan Westburg can again contribute to the Orioles, I would factor that in. It doesn't necessarily feel like that right now, but that, excuse me, could change.
Yeah, and in terms of a team building perspective, that Felix Bautista injury was so brutal for so many reasons. Obviously, for him, the player, it was the most brutal. But from a team building perspective, that Orioles team was on its way to winning 101 games. Felix Bautista suffers that injury after the trade deadline. So they can't
Yeah.
even go out and trade for a closer to replace him. At least with Kyle Bradish, the Orioles knew going into the trade deadline that they were going to be without Kyle Bradish. And that helps them get Zach Eflin because they knew that they had to replace him. It would be worst case scenario from a team building perspective if Jordan Westbrook gets past the trade deadline dealing with this and then eventually has to be shut down because the Orioles would at that point be past any opportunity to meaningfully upgrade at the infield spot that he is going to occupy, probably third base. So that would be worst case scenario, I think you could say, for the Orioles. So let's hope that they don't get to that. But in terms
Yeah.
of replacing him in the short term, because still this thing is going to keep him out for at least the first several weeks of the season into late April, early May. John, does this to you make it much more likely or any more likely that the Orioles keep Kobe Mayo on this team to start the season and that they stop exploring trade options?
I've never been of any other position that he was going to be on this team, so I do not have any occasion to change that. I have
I have been
strong,
on the opposite end. I've been on the I thought as soon as Pete Alonso signed, I thought first thing the Orioles are going to try to do is trade Kobe Mayo, and it just never happened.
yeah. I mean, I thought in that moment that there was an opportunity to do that, and that maybe their expectations for what they would get back for a player with, an exemplary minor league track record, who they view as a potential long-term core piece. I think that if they were going to lower what they wanted from him or for him, then there would be an opportunity to explore that trade. That clearly didn't happen. I don't think the sources that are indicating to reporters that the Orioles are trying to trade these guys are coming from the Orioles. So like I don't think that's something they're like trying to advertise. If I had to hazard a guess. I do think there's a very necessary and conversation, and not one that, being here in Baltimore, is as easy to have as it would be down there. But I think it's very strange, the process that led to um, Kobe Mayo basically ditching third base, only to come back and have them decide that maybe you actually can do this. That feels very weird to me. I'm sure there are a lot of different reasons for that. Some of them valid, some of them invalid. And I also feel like the idea of him being like, there's a value to having Kobe Mayo, period. But I am not sure about him being penciled in at third base being the, you know, it just feels curious to me. It just feels really curious to me.
Yeah, I mean, he played there today. Mike Elias was asked about whether Kobe Mayo would see a lot more time at third base than he now that this injury has occurred. He said, you know, he's a great defender there for his size. He made clear for his size. Kobe Mayo,
Okay.
since the moment he got drafted out of high school, everybody was saying he's playing third base right now, but eventually he's probably going to have to move to first base. He could play shortstop at a high school as well, and then they kind of moved him to third, and then they moved him to first. I mean, Kobe Mayo didn't play a game at third base since May 6th in the majors. I mean, the Orioles pretty much gave up on him as a third baseman. They solely used him at first base at the expense of Ryan Mountcastle. I mean,
Yeah.
down the stretch, Kobe Mayo's great stretch came at the expense of Mountcastle, who had to sit on the bench and watch this.
John Mabry was a coach on this team because they needed an extra body, but basically his job was to teach Kobe Mayo how to play first base. Like, he was more or less Kobe Mayo's personal coach. And even this notwithstanding, who knows when Jordan Westburg reported this elbow issue. Either way, he was not going to be participating in team workouts, and and working out at third base when they do infield. So there was a spot open for someone to do it. But Kobe Mayo has worked exclusively, I believe, at third base. He has not even done a little bit at first base. Now, is it because third base is harder to do and you want to have that option open? And if he needs to go stand at first base, um, I mean, I guess the reality is that they wouldn't need him to. Like, there's not really a lot of universes where he's anything above plan C at first base. So you put him there at third base and you see how long you can go with him there. I mean, I'm not sure the defensive I'm not sure how you quantify the defensive value, but if he plays third base for the first month of the season and has an 850 OPS, you're going to feel great about him as a third baseman because you're going to win games because he's going to get hits. He's going to be batting eighth while he's doing that. So so let's not you know, but also on the flip side, you need to have some kind of positional and defensive value. And third base is a hard position to play. Renato Nunez didn't play any third base, after 2018, but in 2019 he had 31 home runs with a 770 OPS and was basically a .1 WAR with like a 99 WRC plus. Like that's all well and good, but you need to be able to be a impactful major league player. You have to be able to play a position. They're asking him to play a position that they just asked him not to play.
Yeah. I mean, this is a rubber meets the road moment. I think back to, we have the conversation every November when teams have to add players to their 40-man roster in order to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. Teams can say all they want, as many great things as they want about prospects who are getting close to needing to be protected. But what they really tell us is what they do at that deadline, whether they protect them or whether they don't. They can say, we love this guy. We see a big league future for this guy. And then they leave him unprotected. And that tells us everything that we need to know about what they think about his future. This is a moment where Kobe Mayo has been, as you said, been getting a lot of time at third base during spring training. Maybe that's just because the Orioles already have two other guys who can play first, who are first basemen, and they needed a spot to put him. But we're going to find out if the Orioles think that he can play third base. I mean, we have to find out at some point, unless the Orioles make a major move in the next 5 weeks, which is entirely possible, either sending Mayo out or bringing another third baseman in. We're going to find out if they trust him over there, and we're going to see if he deserves that trust based on how he plays. He's just going to have to hit, because I think neither of us are expecting Kobe Mayo to step right in at third base after how things went last year and play a Gold Glove caliber third base. You are at best going to get average play at third base, which is fine if he hits like he hit over the last couple weeks of the regular season. He's just going to have to be able to hit to keep his spot in the lineup. And I'm sure the Orioles feel very good about their acquisition of Blaze Alexander. Mike Elias said, believe it or not, we acquired Blaze Alexander before either of these injuries to Jordan Westburg, the oblique or the what's the injury he just suffered, or the partially torn UCL. They went out and got Blaze Alexander because they thought he could be a nice bench piece. Well, guess what? Blaze Alexander is going to have to be thrust into a starting role pretty darn early at second base or at third base.
Yeah, and it feels like that is going to be one of those things where you look back on this offseason and say, okay, like if they hadn't done that, let's just say like if they hadn't, and Cade Stroud, sure, okay, decent arm, could have been an up and down like front end of the bullpen reliever, and there's some prospects involved too, but that's the type of move that I definitely didn't write about it. Like, it's not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things, but it's the difference between, potentially being able to tread water until Jackson Holiday gets back, or hold your own, or have a representative major league player, or not. The rest of the infielders that were working with the big leaguers, like the true, there was the main infield, and then there was the rest of the guys infielder, and Weston Wilson was working at third base. Luis Vasquez was at short. That's kind of it. Blaze Alexander was at second. Jeremiah Jackson was doing a lot of second base. Like, if there's no Blaze Alexander in this picture, it looks a little different, and I think that's a pretty prescient form of roster building. But again, that happened as the Orioles were taking a holistic look at their roster and saying, let's see what we have. Let's, like I mentioned last week, stress test this. Let's see, if we spend a couple weeks without Jackson Holiday or a couple months without Jordan Westburg. Here's what it would be like if we had those guys, and this smaller number on the next column in the next row is what would happen if we did not have those guys. And what they realized is that they needed to address that. Now, that is a completely valid um, way to go about completing an offseason and building out your roster. That happened at a time when everyone, rightly, wrongly, maybe somewhere in between, was focused on whether they were going to sign Framber Valdez or add a frontline starting pitcher. And the gulf of quality between their best case scenario and the worst case scenario was probably larger in value than what one starting pitcher would add to this rotation. I think that's an interesting way to look at it if one wants to.
Yeah, I think the Orioles envision Blaze Alexander would come in and play maybe 60 games, or I don't know, maybe upwards of 80 if they use him in the outfield. That number seems to be getting higher and higher in terms of projected games played. Another guy who he has to hit. I mean, last year he hit 230 in the big leagues. He struggled down the stretch. He's got to be able to carry his weight at the plate if he wants to stay in the lineup. Do you imagine the Orioles making another major league addition to their infield? They claimed Brian Ramos today, who is 23 years old, right-handed hitting, third baseman, 36 career big league games, played just 4 games last year with the Chicago White Sox, hit 216 with a 705 OPS in AAA last year. To me, I see Brian Ramos as depth. I see him as an Emmanuel Rivera type, maybe somebody that they try to sneak through waivers again. But John, the name that's on everybody's mind right now, on the tip of everybody's tongue, Ramon Urias, still a free agent. Is the reunion between Ramon and the Orioles in play here?
Of course it's in play because, nothing's not in play. That would be interesting. And I just want to also say that while Blaze Alexander did hit 230, he was a 1-win player in 74 games and had an OPS over 700. We're not talking about somebody who was bad. He struck out too much and he hit for a low average, and the strikeout part matters and batting average doesn't. So this is a player who is going to play some kind of role, and it's not as if he's never done this before. He's going to impact the game in a lot of ways. And I'm not saying you don't sign Ramon Urias or you don't do something more because you have him, but it's not as if he is, I think he's to say that, he's better than Luis Vasquez. I think that's pretty clear. And that's what they would be doing right now. That was what they would be doing right now if he did not exist.
Yeah.
So to get to the Ramon Urias point, it feels like it's possible, but he's also, and he's all the reasons that make him qualify are probably the same reasons that he would maybe want to think about not doing it. Obviously, you want to be in the big leagues. You want an opportunity. He knows that the opportunities are fleeting at best here, and he knows what it's going to look like when those opportunities stop happening. And he's just back on the bench, not playing all the time. I'm sure there's a price point where it makes sense. I'm sure it would be advantageous to the Orioles to have someone in there doing that. But when you said there's a name on the tip of everybody's tongue, I thought there was going to be some kind of high profile trade thing that I haven't thought about. But
Alec
I
Bohm?
was thinking, yeah, I don't think they're going to do anything big, period. But I was thinking about, in the context of this, if Kobe Mayo was another team's player and the Orioles could use prospects or whatever it takes to, or trade pitching, whatever, to get Kobe Mayo for this job as a player who had a pretty sterling minor league track record, who is by all intents blocked. If Kobe Mayo was on the Pittsburgh Pirates, he wouldn't be blocked, so that's kind of silly. If he was on the Dodgers, if the Dodgers had a Kobe Mayo, and you didn't know if he could play third, and you didn't know if he could consistently hit in the big leagues, but you had a minor league track record, and you were able to forecast out how players who do those things in the minors do them in the big leagues, would trading for Kobe Mayo be a sufficient thing to do now for cover?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So, yeah,
I mean,
maybe. And would trading for Kobe Mayo at what it would cost to get a Kobe Mayo be a more cost efficient thing than trading for Alec Bohm or somebody who's proven? Like, yes. And do the Orioles want to be having Kobe Mayo play third base every day for the first 2 months of the season? I would venture to say if they had to draw it up, maybe not. But that doesn't really matter because they're going to probably give him an opportunity to do that. And, I'm saying all this, and if they actually ever decide to trade him, like, I will have been wrong. But he's here, and there he is. Until he's
Yeah.
gone. And we talk also about, I think we've had conversations about building out this bench and building out this roster, and it's different now that we're talking about more everyday role at third base. But the point of roster cutdowns at the end of March, middle of March, whenever they happen, is to keep as many players that you probably want to keep as you can. So if there's a Weston Wilson, if there's a Will Robertson, if there's somebody in, I'm saying all this knowing the spring training stats don't matter and none of what's happening in Sarasota that we can tell, even though we get to watch games on mass and to the extent we choose to and see the stats, like none of this matters. If they decide they want to keep one of those guys and add them to the roster and option a player with options, then that's probably going to be the thing that they do. So that's not going to be the solution for 162, but it's going to be the solution for 1 and 2 and 3 if that's what it comes down to. And I think this is just kind of, I feel like this is kind of just one of those areas where there's a lot of ways to go about it, and there's just also a couple of like core truths that are hard to overlook when you are talking about it.
I just think back to last year where the runway was clear for Heston Kjerstad to get everyday playing time. And Kjerstad and Mayo were in similar boat, both taken in the same draft class, both premier minor league hitters, both top 100 prospects, both highly regarded with power bats who have iffy defense at their respective positions. The runway was clear. Anthony Santander signed with the Blue Jays. The Orioles bring in Tyler O'Neill, but he's a righty. And you're saying, all right, this is the time for Heston Kjerstad to mash. And it didn't work out for whatever reason. And we may never know exactly what went on with Heston Kjerstad in 2025. But he had a real opportunity, and Orioles fans were excited to see him. And unfortunately, it didn't go well. And he had negative 1.6 WAR and struggled, got optioned, and didn't play a game after July. You just are taking on a risk. I mean, there's every reason to believe that Kobe Mayo will hit in the big leagues, but there is a little bit of a risk that you're not incurring if you go out and get Alec Bohm or Isaac Paredes or anybody else who could be on the trade market. So the runway has been cleared for Kobe Mayo. He just has to take off at a certain point. And so I do think it is understandable and would be totally, I would accept that the Orioles would want to go see how Kobe Mayo is. I think it's completely understandable. It just has to happen. And they don't know as much as, they can predict, but it's not a guarantee.
Yeah, and the case for going out and doing something that's bigger than than rolling with what they have is that they've already done everything they did. And that was also the case for just why don't you sign a pitcher like another starter too, because you've already done it. Excuse me, and that didn't necessarily work out in the manner that many thought it would, although they signed Chris Bassett. And the impact of that is going to be probably pretty clear on the depth and the quality of the rotation. The reason to go out and make one of those big trades is because what's the point of not once you've already gone this far down the road? That's like 2020. That's, if we're talking like, BC and AD, like that's AD, like since last season ended, like that is kind of the dividing line of like,
yeah,
the Orioles are going to do things one way, and then they're also good. Then now they're just going to do things the other way. And like, I'm getting very, I don't want to say like that's the New Testament way, but like the Old Testament way is like, well, we've already, we've committed a lot this year. If we commit more to this year, we'll have less to commit to future years. Like that's just the type of stuff that's real stuff. That's real.
Yeah.
And that's not cool. That's not fun. It's not something I take any joy in saying. It's just, I think there's enough, and I think this is what is going to be kind of the deciding factor, is that Jordan Westburg is an incredibly important part of this lineup, and not having him will make a difference. Will everything else that is expected to be better in this lineup coalesce so that the impact of not having Jordan Westburg on the field, off the field, everywhere you would think about the Orioles, is that specifically, like, is that going to be enough to overcome that? It's not going to be about Kobe Mayo being a positive DRS third baseman. It's not going to be about Kobe Mayo's OPS, although some OPS would be nice to go very almost famous on us. It's going to be about, is Pete Alonso Pete Alonso? Is Taylor Ward Taylor Ward? Is Gunnar Henderson lifting the ball again? It's all the things that we talk about all the time. And if it was just about the latter half of that, like, is Colton Cowser going to make enough contact to and like hit enough fastballs to be an overall productive player? Is Gunnar Henderson's shoulder going to be okay? Is Adley Rutschman back to being Adley Rutschman? Is Heston Kjerstad going to do anything? Is Tyler O'Neill going to be healthy again? If it was all those ifs that we kind of already lived and experienced, it would be bad. It would be like a really uncomfortable feeling to be losing Jordan Westburg. And I think the thing that would make anyone, to say that the Orioles, not to say the Orioles are comfortable with this, but they are probably more comfortable based on, you just kind of know you're going to get like 155 games of Taylor Ward with a 110 OPS plus and WRC plus. Like, you know what Pete Alonso is going to do, barring something bad happening. Those things are, nothing's knowable. They play the games, but they have built-in cushions for this, even if it's not the infield. And I think it just needs to be said that the infield is where all these things are happening, and that's pretty much the only area other than the Blaze Alexander trade where they kind of just let things be. and
Yeah.
and naturally that is the one where they're kind of feeling it right now.
Yeah, of course. Well, you just talked about how none of this matters. The Grapefruit League doesn't matter. The spring training games don't matter. But fans who
reading and listening, though,
keep reading, listening. I'm sure a lot of people were watching the game at work, wherever they were, sneaking the game, or where they were working from home, put the game on in the background. You saw Pete Alonso hit his first dinger in an Orioles uniform. It was an absolute bomb. It came in an at-bat he wasn't even supposed to have. Apparently, he just wanted to stay in for another at-bat because he's got an off day tomorrow, and hit a rocket. The Orioles win their game 2-0. Also on the back of 3 shutout innings from Trey Gibson, Orioles' top pitching prospect, showing himself off. A lot of Orioles fans haven't, unless they've made the trip to Bowie or Norfolk, haven't gotten to watch Trey Gibson pitch. Great to see him showing off his deep arsenal. And how about a 2-hit game for Sam Huff, who I made the case on in the last podcast? Maybe the Orioles should keep a third catcher. John, I'm sure that raised your blood pressure a lot just hearing that.
I meant to lead off just saying thank you for not including me in that conversation.
Too late.
I understand that it's a thing, and it's also
the wrong thing.
It's not a thing. But there are certain core beliefs that I have, and also I need to just say that, like, I'm not like really versed in the Sam Huff experience. If Sam Huff can hit, sure, he can be on the team. I don't really care at that point. I think they should be choosing the 13. I think you have to have like your positions covered, but I think the first tiebreaker should be, can this guy hit? And the second tiebreaker should be, but really, can he hit? And then the third should be like, whatever, like, where are we going to have him stand on the field? Yeah. So if Sam Huff wants to hit better than, gosh, what
he's
are we
got
talking
a
about?
career OPS plus over 100. That's all I'm saying.
Cool.
It all came because of a few years ago he had a great stint, but then with Texas, but then just hasn't gotten a whole lot of opportunities since then.
Yeah, no, and like totally fine. But like, is he going to help the Orioles win more games off the bench than Heston Kjerstad, than Kobe Mayo, than Ryan Mountcastle, than Jeremiah Jackson, than any of these other NRIs, than Leody Taveras, than Big Christmas? Like, If the answer to that is yes, then the answer to having a third catcher is yes.
Yeah, we'll find out over the next 5 weeks of spring training. John, go attend to your cat. I think Thomas wants some of your attention.
He's chilling now. I don't know. He eats around this time, and then he kind of like runs around and goes to the bathroom. So he's been bothering me a lot since I got home. I got to be honest, and I don't want to put him on blast, but he's been really like a pain. I have a huge scratch on my thigh from him wanting to play with me at 5 o'clock in the morning as I was walking to the bathroom. So that was me exposing myself as an old man, and also just providing generally too much information.
Hey, that's what people sign up for. And they can subscribe to the Banter Baseball Show anywhere that they get their podcasts. Like, rate, review, subscribe. Share this podcast with your friends if you enjoy it. Write us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, and I'll read it out here on the show. At John Meoli is his handle. I'm at Paul Mancano and at All Banner Sports. Subscribe to the Banner. $1 for 6 months. Plenty more coverage coming your way. Andy Kuska is still down in Sarasota. Follow him for all of the latest Orioles news, and we will have another podcast episode for you, hopefully next week at some time. We'll let you know.